The 12 delegates sat around the circular table, each representing their species in the annual discussion that had become tradition among the Galactic Council. This year's topic fascinated everyone present. What evolutionary pressures created the deadliest hunters across known space? Dr. Lyra adjusted her crystalline form, light refracting through her translucent body as she prepared to speak first. The Vithrak had always taken pride in their unique abilities, and she was eager to share their story. Our homeworld, Vithos Prime, experiences methane storms that last for cycles, she began, her voice creating harmonic resonances that the translation devices converted to understandable speech. These storms carry charged particles that can tear apart organic matter. Only those who could phase through solid matter survived. Over millions of years, we developed the ability to shift our molecular density at will. We can walk through walls, avoid physical attacks, and strike from impossible angles. The other delegates nodded appreciatively. Commander Thule clicked his mandibles together, a sign of respect among the Chiton Empire. His insectoid features reflected the harsh lighting as he leaned forward. Impressive, but consider this, Thule said, his forearms gesturing as he spoke. Our homeworld had predators that hunted in packs of thousands. Individual strength meant nothing against such numbers. We evolved as a collective consciousness, able to coordinate perfectly with our hive. One mind controlling millions of bodies, acting with precision that no individual species could match. We can surround enemies from every direction, predict their moves before they make them, and overwhelm any defense through pure coordination. The Saros delegate, General Voss, flicked his forked tongue, tasting the air before speaking. His scales shifted from green to deep red, a display of confidence among his people. Both fascinating adaptations, Voss hissed softly. But raw survival shaped us differently. Our world had acid rain that could dissolve metal, and predators whose venom could kill in seconds. We developed natural armor plating that covers our entire body, and poison glands that make our bite lethal to most known species. We became living weapons, built to survive in conditions that would destroy most life forms. Around the table, other delegates shared similar stories. The aquatic pelagics described developing echolocation, so advanced they could map entire star systems through sound waves. The silicon-based Rockin explained how they learned to manipulate gravity after evolving on a world where the gravitational field shifted randomly. Each species had faced impossible challenges and evolved extraordinary abilities to overcome them. Then all eyes turned to the newest member of the council, sitting quietly at the far end of the table. David Reed represented humanity, the species that had achieved faster-than-light travel just 50 years ago, and immediately requested council membership. He looked unremarkable compared to the other delegates. No crystal body, no extra arms, no natural armor, no obvious adaptations at all. Ambassador Reed, Dr. Lyra said, her harmonic voice carrying curiosity. We would be honored to hear about humanity's evolutionary pressures. What environmental challenges created your species' capabilities? David leaned back in his chair, considering the question for a long moment. The other delegates waited patiently, expecting another tale of survival against impossible odds, of evolution driven by necessity. Poor choices, David said simply. The table fell silent. Several delegates exchanged glances, their translation devices working to ensure they had heard correctly. I'm sorry? Commander Thule clicked his mandibles in confusion. Could you elaborate on what you mean by poor choices? David shook his head with a slight smile. That's the answer. Poor choices. Dr. Lyra's crystalline form shifted colors, indicating her growing bewilderment. Ambassador, perhaps you misunderstood the question. We're asking about the environmental pressures, the deadly predators, the harsh conditions that forced your species to develop its capabilities. I understood perfectly, David replied, and my answer remains the same. General Voss's scales darkened to a deep purple, showing his irritation. This is highly irregular. Every species here has shared the challenges that shaped them. Are you suggesting that humans faced no evolutionary pressures at all? I'm not suggesting anything, David said calmly. I'm telling you that the answer to your question is poor choices. If you want to understand what that means, you're welcome to investigate. The delegates looked at each other in growing confusion and mild offense. Never before had a species refused to explain their evolutionary background. Dr. Lyra tried a different approach. Perhaps you could tell us about your homeworld, Surely Earth presented some challenges that required adaptation. David shrugged. Feel free to visit and see for yourself. I think you'll find it quite pleasant. Commander Thul's forearms gestured in agitation. Pleasant? How does a pleasant world create a species capable of achieving faster-than-light travel in such a short time? Humans went from primitive civilization to galactic travel in just a few thousand years. That level of rapid advancement typically requires extreme environmental pressure, or poor choices, David repeated. The room erupted in frustrated chittering, harmonic discordance and scale color changes as the delegates expressed their confusion. Dr. Lyra called for order, her voice cutting through the noise. Ambassador Reed, with respect, your responses are not helpful. We're trying to understand humanity's place in the galactic community. Every species here has shared their evolutionary story. It helps us understand each other's capabilities and limitations. David stood up, straightening his simple uniform. I appreciate that, Dr. Lyra, but I've given you the only answer that matters. If you want to understand humans, don't ask me to explain it. Go look for yourselves. Study our world, study our history, study us. Then you'll understand what I mean by poor choices. He paused at the door, looking back at the confused faces around the table. Fair warning, though, you might not like what you find. With that, David left the chamber, leaving 12 of the galaxy's most advanced species staring after him in complete bewilderment. Dr. Lyra was the first to break the silence. This is unacceptable. No species has ever refused to share their evolutionary background. How are we supposed to understand their capabilities if they won't explain them? Commander Thul's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of deep thought among his people. Perhaps that's exactly why they won't explain. Maybe their capabilities are something they don't want us to understand. General Voss's scales had shifted to a deep black, indicating serious concern. Or maybe they're hiding something about their world. No species develops advanced technology without facing significant challenges. There must be something on Earth they don't want us to know about. Dr. Lyra's crystalline form pulsed with decision. Then we'll find out ourselves. I propose a joint research expedition to Earth. We'll study their world, their evolution, their history. Whatever humans are hiding, we'll discover it. The other delegates agreed immediately. Within hours, they had organized the largest interspecies research expedition in Council history. 12 ships carrying the finest scientists from each member species, prepared to depart for Earth. None of them could have imagined what they would find there. 3 weeks after leaving Harmony 7, the research fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. Dr. Lyra stood in the observation deck of the lead science vessel, surrounded by her fellow researchers, all eager to finally solve the mystery of humanity's cryptic response. Initial scans are coming in, announced Dr. Kalos, the expedition's chief analyst from the Helix Confederation. His tentacles danced across holographic displays as data streamed in. This is unexpected. Commander Thul moved closer to examine the readings. What do you mean unexpected? Well, for starters, this system has only one star and it's remarkably stable. No solar flares, no irregular radiation bursts, no gravitational anomalies. The third planet from the star shows signs of abundant water, a moderate magnetic field, and Dr. Kalos paused, checking his instruments again. Gravity is only slightly higher than galactic standard. Dr. Lyra felt her crystalline structure shift with confusion. That can't be right. Check the readings again. I've run them 3 times, Dr. Kalos replied. Earth appears to be what we would classify as a garden world. Optimal conditions for life development. General Voss's scales flickered through several colors as he processed this information. There must be something else. Hidden dangers, perhaps? What about the planet's predators? Scanning now, Dr. Kalos said, his tentacles working faster as the fleet moved closer to Earth. I'm detecting various life forms. Large mammals, some reaching impressive sizes, but nothing that registers as exceptionally dangerous by galactic standards. The largest land predators appear to be feline species weighing perhaps 200 kilograms at most. The research team exchanged bewildered glances. Every death world they had studied featured predators that dwarfed such creatures. On Saros Prime, the acid spitters were the size of small spacecraft. On Thul's homeworld, swarm hunters moved in groups of millions. What about atmospheric composition? Dr. Lyra asked, grasping for some explanation. 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, trace gases, highly breathable for most species. No toxic elements, no corrosive compounds. Dr. Kalo sounded as confused as everyone else felt. As their ships entered Earth's atmosphere, the research team prepared for their first direct contact with the planet's surface. They had expected to need environmental suits, defensive equipment, and emergency protocols. Instead, they found themselves landing in what could only be described as a park. Green grass stretched in all directions, dotted with trees that swayed gently in a mild breeze. The temperature was comfortable, the air was clean, and small animals hopped around without showing any signs of predatory behavior. It looked like a vacation resort, not the homeworld of a species that had achieved galactic civilization in record time. "This makes no sense," General Voss muttered, his scales shifting to a pale yellow that indicated deep confusion among his people. "Where are the environmental pressures? Where are the challenges that forced humans to evolve?" Dr. Lyra decided to take a direct approach. Using the translation device provided by the human embassy, she contacted the local authorities. Within an hour, a human representative arrived to meet with them. The human introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Wells, an evolutionary biologist from the nearby university. She looked exactly as unremarkable as Ambassador Reed had. Average height, no visible natural weapons, no apparent adaptations for extreme survival. "Welcome to Earth," Dr. Wells said cheerfully. "Ambassador Reed told us you might be coming. You're here to study our evolutionary development, right?" "Indeed," Dr. Lyra replied, still trying to understand what she was seeing. "We're particularly interested in the environmental challenges that shaped your species' development." Dr. Wells looked around the peaceful meadow where they had landed. "Well, you're looking at it. This is pretty typical of Earth's environment. Moderate climate, abundant resources, relatively few natural disasters." Commander Thul's mandibles clicked rapidly. "But that's impossible. No species develops advanced technology without facing significant evolutionary pressure. What forced humans to become more capable?" "Forced?" Dr. Wells laughed. "Nothing forced us. We just kept trying new things." "New things?" Dr. Lyra asked. Experimentation. Someone would have an idea and we'd try it out. If it worked, great. If it didn't, we'd try something else. We've always been curious about how things work and whether we could make them work better." The alien researchers stared at her in disbelief. General Voss spoke first. "You mean to tell us that humans develop technology not out of necessity, but out of curiosity?" "Pretty much," Dr. Wells nodded. "I mean, sure. Sometimes we invented things because we needed them. But a lot of our biggest advances came from people just wondering, what if we tried this? Or I wonder if this is possible." Dr. Kalos wrapped his tentacles around his datapad, seeking comfort in familiar motion. "But what about your predators? Surely you faced significant threats from other species on your world." "Oh, we had some dangerous animals," Dr. Wells admitted. "Large cats, bears, wolves in packs. But honestly, once we figured out tools and fire, they weren't much of a problem. Most of the time, they avoided us as much as we avoided them." "Then what drove your rapid technological advancement?" Dr. Lyra pressed. "What environmental factor pushed your species to develop faster than light travel?" Dr. Wells thought for a moment. "Well, we wanted to see what was out there. The universe is big and we were curious about it. Plus, there were resources in space that we couldn't get on Earth. And some of our problems were getting big enough that having more room seemed like a good idea." The research team spent the rest of the day interviewing Dr. Wells and examining Earth's environment. Everything they discovered contradicted their understanding of how advanced species developed. Earth was pleasant, comfortable, and remarkably safe. The deadliest creatures were manageable with basic tools. The climate was stable and mild. That evening, as they gathered in their temporary research station, the alien scientists tried to make sense of what they had learned. "There has to be something we're missing," Commander Thul insisted. "No species advances this rapidly without significant pressure." "Maybe they're lying," General Voss suggested. "Maybe Earth isn't really their homeworld, or maybe they're hiding the real dangers." Dr. Lyra shook her head. "The genetic evidence is clear. Humans evolved on this planet, and Dr. Wells showed us geological records going back millions of years. This planet has been stable and habitable for most of its history. Then how do we explain their capabilities?" Dr. Kellos asked. "Humans achieved space travel faster than any known species. They developed weapons that could destroy their own planet. They created artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and quantum computers all within a few thousand years. That level of advancement requires enormous pressure." Dr. Lyra stood quietly for a long time, staring out at Earth's peaceful landscape. 2 moons hung in the clear sky, and she could see lights from human cities twinkling in the distance. It looked so normal, so unremarkable. Maybe that's exactly the point, she said finally. Maybe the absence of pressure is what makes humans dangerous. The other researchers looked at her with confusion. Think about it, Dr. Lyra continued. Every other species we know developed their capabilities because they had to. We become dangerous to survive. But what if humans became dangerous because they could? What if they developed all these abilities not because their environment demanded it, but because they were bored? The research team fell silent considering this possibility. It was a disturbing thought. A species that created weapons of mass destruction and achieved galactic travel not out of necessity, but out of curiosity. We need to dig deeper, Dr. Lyra decided. Dr. Wells mentioned that humans have detailed historical records. Tomorrow we're going to study how humans actually developed their technology. Maybe their history will tell us what their environment couldn't. None of them could sleep that night, lying awake under Earth's peaceful stars, wondering what kind of species chooses to become dangerous when they don't have to. Dr. Lyra sat in the archive room of the Global History Institute, surrounded by holographic displays showing thousands of years of human records. What she had discovered over the past week made her crystalline form dim with growing unease. The other researchers worked at similar stations throughout the building, each one uncovering pieces of a puzzle that none of them wanted to complete. This can't be accurate, Commander Thule muttered from across the room, his forearms trembling as he reviewed military records. These numbers have to be wrong. Dr. Patricia Wells, who had been serving as their guide through human history, looked up from her own terminal. Which numbers are you questioning? According to these records, humans have fought over 14,000 wars in the past 5,000 years, Thule replied, his mandibles clicking nervously. That's nearly 3 wars per year consistently for millennia. That sounds about right, Dr. Wells said casually, as if discussing the weather. Though the definition of war can be tricky. Are we counting civil wars? Regional conflicts? Tribal disputes? General Voss's scales had been cycling through colors of distress all morning. Dr. Wells, these records show that humans developed weapons capable of destroying your entire planet. Multiple times. Different types of planet-killing weapons. Well, yes, Dr. Wells nodded. Nuclear weapons, biological weapons, certain chemical compounds. We've been pretty creative in that area. But why? Dr. Lyra asked, her harmonic voice carrying overtones of confusion. Your planet was safe. You had no external threats. What possible reason could you have for creating such destructive capabilities? Dr. Wells paused, seeming to consider how to explain something that was obvious to her but apparently shocking to her alien guests. We were fighting each other. The research room fell silent except for the humming of computer systems. Dr. Kellos wrapped his tentacles around himself, a defensive posture among his people. Fighting each other, he repeated slowly. You mean internal conflicts? Civil disputes? I mean war, Dr. Wells said. Humans fought other humans, constantly. For territory, resources, ideological differences, religious beliefs, ethnic differences, economic advantages, political control. Really, we could find reasons to fight about almost anything. Dr. Lyra felt her molecular structure fluctuate with distress. But that's evolutionary suicide. Species that fight among themselves instead of cooperating against external threats typically go extinct. Well, we came close a few times, Dr. Wells admitted, but we always managed to step back from the brink at the last moment. Usually because we realized that if we destroyed ourselves, we wouldn't be able to try new things anymore. Commander Thule had been reading through technological development records. This timeline shows that humans developed metallurgy, chemistry, explosives, firearms, powered flight, nuclear energy, computers, and space travel, all while actively fighting wars. How is that possible? Oh, the wars helped, Dr. Wells said matter-of-factly. Nothing drives innovation like trying to solve the problem of how to defeat other humans. We developed most of our major technologies because they gave us advantages in conflicts. General Voss's scales turned a deep black, indicating genuine fear among his people. You're telling us that humans developed planet-killing weapons not to defend against external threats but to use against other humans? That was the plan, yes. Though we never actually used the really destructive ones. We came close, but something always held us back. Dr. Lyra tried to process this information through the lens of everything she knew about galactic civilization. Dr. Wells, every other species we've studied developed their capabilities in response to external pressures. We become dangerous to survive environmental threats, but humans became dangerous to fight. Yourselves? Basically, yes. That's insane, Dr. Kalos whispered. Dr. Wells shrugged. Maybe, but it worked. Every time we fought, both sides got better at solving problems. Better weapons led to better defenses, which led to better weapons. Better communication helped coordinate attacks, which made better communication necessary for defense. Better transportation moved armies, which made better transportation essential for commerce. She gestured to the displays around them. War was terrible, but it forced us to innovate constantly. And between wars, we used all those innovations for peaceful purposes. The same technology that guided missiles also guided spacecraft. The same computers that calculated artillery trajectories also predicted weather and designed buildings. Dr. Lyra spent the next several hours studying human conflict resolution. What she found disturbed her even more than the wars themselves. Humans had developed incredibly sophisticated methods for ending conflicts: diplomacy, negotiation, trade agreements, international law, peace treaties. You're telling me that humans became excellent at making peace because they were excellent at making war? She asked Dr. Wells. We had to, Dr. Wells replied. If you're going to fight constantly, you'd better get good at stopping fights or you'll destroy everything you're fighting for. We learned that lesson the hard way several times. Commander Thule had moved on to studying human exploration records. This makes even less sense. According to these files, humans explored dangerous environments not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. They climbed mountains that could kill them, dove to ocean depths that could crush them, and traveled to regions of their planet that offered no resources or strategic advantages. Exploration is fun, Dr. Wells said. We like seeing new places and figuring out how things work. But the risks, Thule protested. The risks made it more interesting, Dr. Wells explained. If something was completely safe, it wasn't much of an adventure. Dr. Kalos had been analyzing human technological development patterns. I'm seeing something very disturbing here. Most species develop technology in a linear progression. They identify a problem, research solutions, and implement the best option. But humans seem to develop technology chaotically. You create things before you know what to use them for. Sometimes the best discoveries come from just trying stuff, Dr. Wells agreed. We invented lasers decades before we figured out practical applications. We developed computers without knowing they'd revolutionize communications. We split the atom because we were curious about how matter worked, not because we needed a new power source. That's terrifying, Dr. Kalos muttered. General Voss had been studying more recent human history. Dr. Wells, these records show that humans achieved global peace only about 50 years ago. What changed? Dr. Wells smiled. We found something more interesting to fight than each other, which was the universe. Once we developed space travel, we realized that fighting over one planet was kind of pointless when there were billions of planets out there. Why fight for territory when you could just go find new territory? Why compete for resources when space has unlimited resources? Dr. Lyra felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. You're saying that humans stopped fighting each other because you found bigger challenges to tackle? Exactly. Now, instead of figuring out how to defeat other humans, we're figuring out how to explore black holes, terraform planets, and travel between stars. Much more interesting problems to solve. The research team spent the rest of the day in stunned silence, each one reviewing records that confirmed their growing suspicions. Humans hadn't developed their capabilities in response to environmental threats. They had developed them in response to challenges they created for themselves. That evening, as they gathered to share their findings, Dr. Lyra voiced what they were all thinking. Humans are the first species we've encountered that chose to become dangerous. Every other species in the galaxy developed their abilities because survival required it. Humans developed theirs because they were curious about what would happen if they tried. Commander Thule's mandibles clicked slowly, and now they're pointing that same curiosity toward the rest of the galaxy. General Voss's scales had settled into a pattern of deep purple and black. We need to understand what this means for galactic civilization. If humans treat the universe the same way they treated their own planet, they'll keep innovating, keep pushing boundaries, keep trying new things, Dr. Lyra finished. And they'll do it not because they have to, but because they want to. The implications were staggering. Every other species in the galaxy had reached a certain level of technological development, and then stabilized once their survival was secure. But humans might never stop pushing forward, never stop experimenting, never stop looking for new challenges to overcome. We need to see how they operate in practice, Dr. Lyra decided. Tomorrow we're going to observe human military exercises. If we're going to understand what makes them dangerous, we need to see them in action. None of them slept well that night, wondering what they had welcomed into galactic civilization. Early morning mist hung over the human city as Dr. Lyra and her research team walked through what the locals called a residential district. After a week of studying historical records, they had decided to observe contemporary human society to understand how a species, bred for conflict, had managed to achieve the peace necessary for galactic civilization. What they discovered was more unsettling than their historical research. "Look at this," Commander Thule whispered, pointing with one of his forearms toward a nearby park. A group of human children, no more than 6 or 7 years old, were running around with toy weapons, dividing into teams and staging elaborate mock battles. Dr. Patricia Wells, their guide, noticed their concerned stares. "Oh, that's just kids playing war games. Laser tag, capture the flag, that sort of thing. They're training for combat," General Voss observed, his scales shifting to a worried orange. "These children are practicing military tactics." "They're having fun," Dr. Wells corrected. "Most human children play some version of conflict games. It's how we learn strategy, teamwork, and problem-solving." Dr. Keelos wrapped his tentacles nervously around his data pad. "So humans teach warfare to their young as recreational activity?" "We teach competition, strategy, and adaptation," Dr. Wells explained. "The warfare part is just the framework we use because it's exciting." Dr. Lyra watched the children more carefully. They were indeed having fun, laughing and shouting as they adapted their tactics in real time. When one team gained an advantage, the other team immediately changed their approach. When a strategy failed, they tried something completely different. The children seemed to treat each setback as an interesting puzzle rather than a defeat. "This is how you raise your young?" she asked. "Among other things, yes. We also teach them mathematics, history, art, and science. But we found that competitive games help develop the kind of thinking that makes humans successful at problem-solving." As they continued through the city, the research team encountered more examples of what Dr. Wells called recreational danger. Humans willingly participated in activities that could injure or kill them. Extreme sports, dangerous hobbies, and physical challenges that served no practical purpose beyond entertainment. At a facility called a gymnasium, they watched humans deliberately exhaust themselves lifting heavy objects, running on machines that went nowhere, and practicing combat techniques against other humans who fought back. "Why do they do this?" Commander Thule asked, observing 2 humans engaged in what appeared to be ritualized combat. "Exercise," Dr. Wells replied. "It keeps us healthy and strong." "But why does it need to be competitive?" Dr. Lyra inquired. "Why not just maintain your health without the conflict element?" "Because it's more fun this way," Dr. Wells said. "And because pushing against resistance makes us stronger than just maintaining status quo." General Voss had been studying the humans' movements during their exercises. These aren't just random activities. They're practicing combat techniques, strength training, and endurance building. This entire facility is essentially military preparation disguised as recreation. Or maybe, Dr. Wells suggested, military training is just focused recreation. Humans have always enjoyed testing themselves against challenges. That afternoon, they visited what Dr. Wells called an entertainment complex. Here, humans paid money to experience controlled fear. They watched movies designed to frighten them, rode mechanical devices that simulated danger, and played games that required them to solve problems under pressure. "Let me understand this correctly," Dr. Keelos said, his tentacles quivering with confusion. "Humans voluntarily expose themselves to simulated threats for pleasure?" "Horror movies, roller coasters, video games, escape rooms," Dr. Wells listed. "We like being scared as long as we know we're actually safe." Dr. Lyra observed humans screaming with what appeared to be terror on a device that spun them through the air at dangerous speeds. But when the ride ended, they were laughing and immediately got in line to experience it again. "This makes no evolutionary sense," she murmured. Species should avoid danger, not seek it out. Maybe for most species, Dr. Wells agreed. But humans seem to be wired differently. We get bored if everything is too safe and predictable. The research team spent several days studying human recreational activities and made a disturbing discovery. Humans had essentially gamified everything that other species considered serious threats. They turned survival skills into sports, conflict resolution into competitive events, and problem-solving into entertainment. More concerning was their discovery of human extreme sports, activities that pushed the boundaries of survival for no purpose other than the challenge itself. Humans jumped off cliffs with fabric wings, dove into deep water while holding their breath, and raced vehicles at speeds that could kill them instantly if they made a mistake. They're addicted to danger, Commander Thule observed after watching humans deliberately place themselves in life-threatening situations for fun. Not danger exactly, Dr. Wells corrected. Challenge. We like solving problems, especially difficult ones. The more complex or risky the problem, the more satisfying it is to solve. Dr. Lyra began to understand something that terrified her. Humans don't just tolerate risk. You actively seek it out because you find safety boring. That's probably accurate, Dr. Wells admitted. A completely safe, predictable life doesn't appeal to most humans. We want to grow, to improve, to face new challenges. The research team's growing concern reached a peak when they were invited to observe a human military training exercise. They expected to see the systematic, coordinated approach that characterized military organizations across the galaxy. Instead, they witnessed something that defied their understanding of how civilized species should behave. The exercise scenario was simple. A small unit of human soldiers was dropped into an unfamiliar environment with minimal equipment and told to accomplish the mission with very little specific guidance. Where's the detailed planning? Commander Thule asked the human officer overseeing the exercise. Where are the tactical briefings, the coordination protocols, the systematic approach? Colonel Rivera, a veteran human military leader, smiled. That's the point. We don't give them a detailed plan because real situations rarely go according to plan. We want to see how well they adapt when everything goes wrong. What the research team witnessed over the next several hours challenged everything they thought they knew about intelligent species. The human soldiers immediately began experimenting. They repurposed their equipment in ways it was never designed for. They adapted their tactics based on real-time observations. When one approach failed, they instantly tried something completely different. Most disturbing to the alien observers, the humans were enjoying themselves. They laughed when their initial plans failed. They made jokes while solving life-threatening problems. They treated the entire exercise like an entertaining puzzle rather than a serious survival scenario. Look how they respond to failure, Dr. Lyra whispered to her colleagues. They don't see it as defeat. They see it as new information to incorporate into their next attempt. They're not following any doctrine we recognize, General Voss added, his scales cycling through colors of deep concern. They're making it up as they go along. Colonel Rivera overheard their comments. That's exactly right. We call it improvisation. The ability to adapt and innovate in real time is more valuable than following predetermined procedures. But how do you coordinate without established protocols? Commander Thule asked. We communicate, we observe, and we adjust, Rivera explained. Every human soldier is trained to think independently while supporting the team goal. When circumstances change, we change with them. Dr. Kalos had been recording the exercise data. I'm seeing tactical innovations happening in real time. These soldiers are creating new solutions to problems they've never encountered before, and they're doing it without consultation or authorization from higher command. Initiative, Rivera said proudly. We encourage our people to take intelligent risks and try new approaches. Sometimes they fail, but sometimes they discover something brilliant that no one had thought of before. As the exercise concluded, Dr. Lyra realized they had discovered something far more unsettling than humanity's warlike history. Modern humans had channeled their combative instincts into a systematic approach to problem solving that treated the entire universe as an interesting challenge to overcome. They've weaponized curiosity, she whispered to her research team. That evening, as they compiled their observations, the research team tried to process what they had learned about contemporary human society. They've created a civilization that deliberately exposes its members to controlled challenges, Dr. Lyra summarized. They train their children through competitive conflict. They seek out danger for entertainment. And they've turned military doctrine into a philosophy of constant adaptation and innovation. And they're pointing all of this toward galactic civilization, Commander Thule added ominously. General Voss's scales had settled into a pattern of deep black and dark red. We need to understand what this means for the rest of us. If humans approach galactic society the same way they approach everything else, they'll keep pushing boundaries, keep challenging assumptions, keep trying to solve problems that the rest of us have accepted as unsolvable, Dr. Lyra finished. The implications were staggering. Human civilization appeared to be designed specifically to produce individuals who thrived on challenge and innovation. They weren't just dangerous because they could fight. They were dangerous because they never stopped trying to improve everything around them, whether it needed improvement or not. Ambassador David Reed stood on the observation platform overlooking the training facility, watching the alien research team take their positions. He had been monitoring their investigation for weeks, and their growing unease was becoming obvious even through the translation devices. It was time to give them a practical demonstration of what he had meant by poor choices. Dr. Lyra approached him, her crystalline form reflecting the afternoon sunlight in scattered rainbows. Ambassador Reed, we appreciate you arranging this demonstration, but we're still unclear about what we're going to observe. Standard human military training exercise, David replied simply. Nothing special, nothing classified. Just humans doing what humans do when presented with a problem. Commander Thule clicked his mandibles nervously. And this will help us understand your earlier statement about poor choices? Watch and see, David said, gesturing toward the field below. The training area had been set up to simulate an alien environment. Rocky terrain, unexpected obstacles and environmental hazards that would challenge even experienced soldiers. A squad of 12 human soldiers stood at the entry point, wearing basic equipment and carrying standard gear. Colonel Rivera's voice crackled over the communication system. Mission parameters, unknown hostile environment. Limited resources, undefined objectives. Figure it out. You have 6 hours. Dr. Kalos wrapped his tentacles around his recording equipment. That's not a mission briefing. Where are the specific objectives? The detailed intelligence. The tactical analysis. That is the briefing, David explained. Humans perform better when they have to figure things out themselves. Rather than following someone else's plan, the research team watched in fascination as the human soldiers immediately began doing things that defied their understanding of proper military procedure. Instead of forming up in standard formation and moving systematically through the terrain, the humans spread out and started experimenting. One soldier picked up a rock and threw it at what appeared to be a pressure-sensitive trap, triggering it safely from a distance. Another began testing the stability of different surfaces by jumping on them. A third started disassembling part of his equipment to create tools that hadn't existed moments before. They're improvising, General Voss observed, his scales shifting to colors that indicated both admiration and concern. They're not following any established protocol. That's the point, David said. Following established protocols works fine when you're dealing with familiar situations. But humans prefer to assume that any new situation will require new solutions. Dr. Lyra watched 2 soldiers working together to solve what appeared to be a complex puzzle barrier. They weren't consulting manuals or following procedures. They were simply trying different approaches until something worked. When their first 3 attempts failed, they laughed and tried a 4th approach that was completely different from the previous ones. They find failure amusing? She asked. They find failure informative, David corrected. Each failed attempt tells them something useful about the problem they're trying to solve. Most humans actually prefer difficult problems because easy problems don't teach them anything new. Commander, Thule observed a human soldier who had climbed onto a dangerous-looking structure to get a better view of the terrain ahead. That behavior seems unnecessarily risky. Why doesn't he use safer reconnaissance methods? Because the risky approach gives him better information faster, David explained. Humans have a tendency to accept calculated risks in exchange for better results. As the exercise continued, the alien researchers witnessed something that challenged their fundamental understanding of how intelligent species should behave. The human soldiers weren't just solving the problems they encountered. They were actively looking for additional challenges. One team discovered an optional obstacle course that wasn't part of their assigned route. Instead of bypassing it to save time and energy, They decided to attempt it because it looked interesting. Another group found what appeared to be a complex mechanical puzzle and spent valuable time solving it even though it wasn't blocking their path. They're creating unnecessary work for themselves, Dr. Kalos observed. They're exploring possibilities, David countered. Humans have learned that optional challenges often lead to unexpected benefits. That mechanical puzzle, for example, just taught them how similar mechanisms work throughout this facility. Dr. Lyra noticed something even more disturbing about human behavior. When the soldiers encountered a problem that seemed impossible to solve with their available equipment, they didn't give up or request additional resources. Instead, they started combining their equipment in ways it was never intended to be used. She watched two soldiers turn their communication devices into improvised detection equipment by modifying the frequency settings. Another team disassembled their portable shelter to create climbing equipment. A fourth soldier had somehow converted his water purification system into a primitive chemical analysis tool. They're destroying their equipment, she said. They're repurposing their resources, David explained. Humans have a strong tendency to view any object as a collection of useful components rather than as a single-purpose tool. But what if they need those items for their original purpose later? Then they'll figure out something else, David said with a slight smile. Humans are very good at making things work with whatever they have available. The research team spent the next several hours watching humans consistently choose the most challenging possible approach to every problem they encountered. When they found an easy path around an obstacle, they often chose the difficult path instead because it would teach them more about overcoming similar obstacles in the future. Most unsettling was their response to complete failure. When one team's approach to a major challenge resulted in total disaster, they didn't become discouraged or request assistance. Instead, they gathered around the wreckage of their failed attempt and began analyzing what had gone wrong, treating the failure as valuable data for their next attempt. They're not afraid of failing, Commander Thule observed. They're afraid of not learning, David corrected. A human would rather fail while trying something new than succeed by doing something they already know how to do. Dr. Lyra began to understand the true scope of what she was witnessing. This isn't military training. This is systematic innovation training disguised as military exercise. All human military training is innovation training, David agreed. We assume that any real situation will be different from our training scenarios, so we train our people to think creatively rather than follow procedures. As the exercise moved into its final phase, the research team observed the most disturbing human behavior yet. The soldiers had successfully completed their undefined mission by reaching what was obviously the exit point of the training area. Instead of finishing the exercise, they spent their remaining time exploring optional areas they hadn't seen yet, looking for additional challenges to attempt. The exercise is over, General Voss pointed out. They've accomplished their objective. Why are they continuing? Because they found something they haven't figured out yet, David explained, pointing to a group of soldiers examining a complex mechanism near the facility's edge. They want to understand how it works before they leave. But they don't need to understand it, Dr. Kalos protested. It's not part of their mission. Humans have trouble leaving puzzles unsolved, David said. They always want to know how things work, even if the knowledge has no immediate practical application. When the exercise finally ended, the alien researchers expected the human soldiers to show signs of exhaustion, stress, or relief. Instead, they were energetic and excited, discussing what they had learned and comparing different approaches they had tried. That was fun, one soldier commented to his teammate. I hope the next exercise is even more challenging, Renal. Rivera gathered the research team for a debriefing session with the soldiers. Dr. Lyra decided to ask the question that had been bothering her throughout the demonstration. Why do you make everything so difficult for yourselves? She asked the soldiers. You consistently chose the most challenging approach to every problem you encountered. Sergeant Martinez, a veteran soldier with multiple deployment medals, considered the question seriously. Because the easy way doesn't teach us anything new. If we only do things we already know how to do, we don't get better at handling situations we've never seen before. But what's the benefit of getting better at handling unknown situations? Commander Thule asked. Everything is an unknown situation until you figure it out, another soldier replied. The universe is full of problems we haven't encountered yet. The better we get at solving new problems, the more problems we can tackle. Dr. Lyra felt her crystalline structure dim as the implications became clear. You're saying that humans deliberately practice solving unknown problems so that you can take on bigger unknown problems in the future? Exactly, Sergeant Martinez nodded. Easy problems are boring. Hard problems are interesting. Really hard problems are exciting. That evening, as the research team compiled their observations, Dr. Lyra voiced what they were all thinking. We've been asking the wrong question, she said. We've been trying to understand what environmental pressures made humans dangerous. But the truth is, humans made themselves dangerous because they were bored. Commander Thul's mandibles clicked slowly. They turned survival skills into entertainment, military training into puzzle solving, and equipment maintenance into creative engineering challenges. And now they're applying that same approach to galactic civilization, General Voss added, his scales displaying deep patterns of concern. They're not joining the galactic community because they need to. They're joining because it's the biggest, most interesting challenge they've found so far. The research team finally understood what Ambassador Reed had meant by poor choices. Every decision that made humans dangerous was a choice they didn't have to make, a challenge they didn't have to accept, a problem they didn't have to solve. They had created themselves into apex predators not through necessity, but through curiosity, and now they were pointing that same insatiable curiosity toward the rest of the galaxy. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as Dr. Lyra took her position at the central podium. Around the circular table, delegates from 12 species waited to hear the findings of the most comprehensive interspecies research expedition in Council history. The holographic display showed weeks of data, thousands of interviews, and countless hours of observation, but the data told a story that none of them had expected to hear. Honored delegates, Dr. Lyra began, her crystalline form pulsing with the harmonics that indicated serious concern among her people. We have completed our investigation into human evolutionary development. Our findings challenge everything we thought we understood about how apex predators develop. She activated the first display, showing Earth's peaceful landscape and moderate environmental conditions. As suspected, Earth is not a death world. It ranks among the most habitable planets we have ever studied. Moderate gravity, stable climate, abundant resources, and relatively few natural threats. Murmurs of confusion rippled around the chamber. The pelagic delegate raised a fin in question. Then how do you explain human capabilities? Their rapid technological advancement? Their military effectiveness? That is exactly what we needed to understand, Dr. Lyra replied, activating additional displays that showed human historical records. Every other species in this chamber developed their abilities in response to environmental necessities. We became dangerous because we had to in order to survive. Humans became dangerous because they chose to. The chamber erupted in chittering harmonic discord and color changes as delegates expressed their disbelief. Dr. Lyra waited for quiet before continuing. Human historical records show over 14,000 wars in the past 5,000 years. They developed planet-killing weapons not to defend against external threats, but to use against other humans. They created technologies capable of destroying their own civilization multiple times over, not because survival required it, but because they were curious about whether it was possible. Commander Thul's mandibles clicked rapidly. That's evolutionary suicide. How did they survive as a species? Because they also became excellent at ending conflicts, Dr. Lyra explained. Humans developed sophisticated diplomacy, international law, and peacemaking techniques. They learned how to fight and how to stop fighting with equal skill. General Voss's scales cycled through deep purples and blacks. Are you telling us that humans perfected both war and peace simultaneously? We're telling you that humans treat everything as a problem to be solved, Dr. Lyra replied. War was a problem, so they got very good at it. Peace was a problem, so they got very good at that too. Exploration was a problem, so they solved it. Space travel was a problem, so they solved it. They approach every challenge with the same methodology. Figure out how it works, then figure out how to do it better. She activated another display showing contemporary human society. Modern humans have channeled these tendencies into what they call recreational challenge seeking. They voluntarily expose themselves to danger for entertainment. They train their children through competitive conflict games. They turn survival skills into sports and problem-solving into entertainment. The Rockin' delegate, whose species evolved on a world of shifting gravity fields, spoke in their grinding stone voice. This cannot be sustainable. Species that seek unnecessary challenges typically exhaust themselves or face extinction. That's what we thought too, Dr. Lyra admitted. But humans have found something even more interesting to challenge than each other: the universe itself. They achieved global peace when they discovered that exploring space offered bigger, more complex problems to solve than fighting over their home planet. She paused, letting this information settle before delivering the most disturbing finding. We observed human military training exercises where soldiers consistently chose the most difficult approach to every problem, not because it was necessary, but because it was more interesting. They repurpose equipment in ways it was never designed for. They treat failure as valuable information rather than defeat. They actively seek out challenges that other species would avoid. The chamber had grown very quiet. Dr. Lyra activated the final display, showing Ambassador Reed sitting calmly at the far end of the table. Ambassador Reed told us that humans became apex predators through poor choices. He was correct. Every technological advancement, every weapon development, every innovation that made humans dangerous was a choice they didn't have to make. They chose to become dangerous because they found it interesting, not because survival required it. Ambassador Reed stood up, nodding to Dr. Lyra before addressing the chamber directly. Dr. Lyra's research is accurate, he said simply. Humans are probably the first species you've encountered that developed their capabilities not out of necessity, but out of curiosity. We don't become dangerous to survive threats. We become dangerous because we're curious about what happens when we try new things. The helix. Confederation delegate extended, several tentacles in a gesture of confusion. But surely you must have faced some environmental pressures that drove your development. We faced the environmental pressure of being bored, David replied. Earth was too easy. Life was too predictable. So we made it more challenging by competing with each other, exploring dangerous places and trying to solve problems that didn't need solving. Commander Thule leaned forward. And now you're applying this same approach to galactic civilization? We're here because space is the biggest, most interesting challenge we've found, David confirmed. Billions of planets to explore, new species to meet, problems we've never encountered before. From a human perspective, joining galactic civilization is like gaining access to the universe's largest puzzle. Dr. Lyra stepped forward again. This is what we need the Council to understand. Most species reach a certain level of technological development and then stabilize once their survival is secure. They develop what they need and stop. Humans may never stop developing because they never stop finding new challenges to tackle. What does this mean for galactic civilization? The Soros delegate asked, his scales shifting to warning colors. It means change, David said. Humans don't just solve problems, we look for problems to solve. We don't just use technology, we constantly try to improve it. We don't just explore space, we want to understand how everything in space works and whether we can make it work better. The chamber fell silent as delegates processed this information. Finally, the senior council member, an ancient Vithrak whose crystalline form showed the wisdom patterns of centuries, spoke. Ambassador Reed, are you telling us that humanity views the entire universe as something to be improved? We view the universe as something to be understood, David replied. And humans have trouble understanding things without trying to make them work better. It's not that we want to change everything. It's that figuring out how to change things is how we understand them. Dr. Lyra added her final observation. Every other species we know asks, how can we survive in this environment? Humans ask, how can we make this environment more interesting? They're not trying to fit into the universe. They're trying to figure out what the universe is capable of becoming. The implications hung heavy in the chamber. Humans weren't just another species joining galactic civilization. They were a species that treated existence itself as an ongoing experiment. Commander Thule voiced what many delegates were thinking. Should we be concerned about human membership in the Council? David considered the question seriously. That depends on whether you're comfortable with change. Humans are going to keep trying new things, keep pushing boundaries, keep looking for bigger challenges. We'll probably discover things about the universe that you haven't discovered yet. develop technologies you haven't thought of, and ask questions you haven't considered. He paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled delegates. We're not trying to be threatening. We're just trying to be human. But being human means never being satisfied with leaving things the way they are. The ancient Vythrak spoke again. And if we asked you to stop? To settle down and accept the universe as it is? David smiled. Then you'd be asking us to stop being human, which is probably impossible. We've been trying to change ourselves for thousands of years, and we keep making ourselves more curious, not less. Dr. Lyra made her final statement to the council. Our recommendation is this. Human membership in galactic civilization will accelerate change throughout all our societies. They will solve problems we didn't know we had, develop technologies we didn't know we needed, and ask questions we didn't know were worth asking. Whether this is beneficial or dangerous depends entirely on whether we're prepared to grow along with them. The council session ended with no formal vote, but with each species quietly reconsidering what they had welcomed into their civilized galaxy. As delegates filed out, many could be heard making similar observations to their staff. Keep the humans happy and pointed away from us. But some, particularly the younger delegates, were overheard asking different questions. What kinds of problems do you think they'll solve next? And I wonder what they'd discover if we worked with them. Ambassador Reed remained in his seat as the chamber emptied, finally understanding why his simple answer had caused such concern. Humans weren't just apex predators. They were apex problem solvers who treated the entire universe as an interesting problem. And they had just been welcomed into a civilization full of new problems to solve.